Hello, everyone. It's Danica. As the host of this meeting, I would like to acknowledge that I work and live on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. I am situated on the Haldeman Tract, the land promised to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on either side of the Grand River. As an ally, I have the responsibility to support the Indigenous community. As we have individuals from across this country at this event, as part of reconciliation, the ask is to recognize and acknowledge whose traditional land you are a settler on, as it depends on your geographical location. Today, we have a discussion that includes the raw lived experiences of trauma of First Nations people who are CNIB participants of the First Nations Peer Support Group. Clara and Wilf bear the many challenges they have faced during their time at residential school and the healing that they have endured for the years following. Kathy shares her experiences as an Indigenous person in the form of a poem. I would also like to note that Clara shares some words in her first language or native tongue, which is OG Cree. Clara also shares her spirit name. She let us know how important her native language is for her to continue speaking because it is dying out, which is a consequence of the residential schools. We are now going to hear from the participants.
Okay, bonjour. Nina Clara Quizis Indigenous, that's my English name, Clara Quizis. And I always include my traditional name that I received from the medicine man. Like every time I introduce myself, I remind myself to include that. That's part of our getting back to who I am as Anishinaabe Kwe. To acknowledge me as First Nation Indigenous woman. Well, I was given CNIB Kwe, which means river woman. My clan is Sturgeon, and in my language, I say Name to them. And then I was born in Lansdowne House, Ajongang Ndonji. That's what it was called back then. We had we used our own ways of naming where we grew up or where we settled, and we didn't have anything in English. So I acknowledge all of the things that I say in my language because I'm First Nation. I would like to begin about before I went to residential school. I was 6 years old. How my life was like. How it got taken away from me. What I grew up with as Anishinaabe Queens back then. I grew up in the bush. We traveled rivers, and my family, we come into groups of families, and then we hunt, fish, and trap. That's all we did. We didn't all year round. The only time that we went to Lansdowne House is on Christmas, or it must have been Easter, because I remember 2 times we would go there and we'd go back in the bush. Like, we had everything what we have now. Like, we had knowledge keepers. We had in our own way. We had naval keepers. Like today, they call them midwives. Knowledge keepers are people who have lots of knowledge and they have degrees and all that. We had our own way in our traditional way of knowledge. We had medicine men, and then they took that away from us. And people, we still have those in our system because it was given to us by the Creator, and it will never be gone. We will never disappear because we're part of this continent, this turtle island. We were made up of different nationalities, and us is one of the indigenous. Like, we have, the 4 quadrants of the earth. There's like different continents from different worlds. Like, we have Chinese, Japanese, and we have Africans, and we have the English people and the Irish, and those are all put in white category, and the yellow ones are those east people that come from the east, and us we're the ones that are from the Anishinaabe from up north. So I learned that what happened, why we have to go to school is because they don't want us to. They're just wrecking our livelihood, our ways. As Anishinaabe, they don't want us to practice our own ways of how to, the things that was given to us. Like, we had our own ways of knowledge, our own ways of discipline. We had bundles, and we had what happened is that the way the women were the water keepers and give of life. And then they were the decision makers. They were the ones that you go to. We have to change our ways of life and have reservations, and we have band counselors and chiefs, and then the reservation is not our culture. It came from the government. That's not how we had before colonialism. I always like to acknowledge our ancestry, how they lived their lives, to know that we're still here in the spirit world. They're there, and they're happy to see us, that we can still speak the language. We still can eat fish and hunt moose. And then they're happy when they see us doing feasting and gathering. That was our way. We do our feastings. We didn't have Christmas, or those are from the Christian ways that you celebrate Christmas, you celebrate Easter. us, we celebrated the 4 seasons, especially in in spring, because everything is back to life. And then we celebrate the summer, and then we celebrate everything that was given to us in the fall. And then in the wintertime, we feast. That's when everything is what we had received and we had accomplished, and everything was acknowledged. That's the way we were given. That's how the Anishinaabe people respected their culture. It's helping our community, to our people, to share, when we're allowed to share these stories, that what happened. So this is the way of healing, to a way of understanding.
Well, I have a different experience from residential school. But first, I would like to mention, before I was at the residential school, I was in a hospital here in CNIB in a sanatorium. That's what it was called. And I was there for 2 years. And while I was there, I was able to learn how to read and write very little and understand English from the nurses or from a social worker, and all the other children that was in the same ward with me had the same experience. Yeah, so I was familiar with that, with different people, and also being away from my parents, I was already familiar with that. So going to residential school was not something new to me. Being away from my homeland and also from my parents, I was comfortable, not like being away. Because of being at the hospital, like I associate with different people, and also with different kids, different environment, and I often thought about that. And the good thing about it was the foreigners were helping me to get well, to get better, to get back to in a good health. That's what I used to think when I was there. These people are good. That's what I used to think. Or even a doctor that used to come to see me, see how I'm doing, or even a nurse giving me a needle or giving me pills. For me, that was something good, bringing help, assisting me to be in a good health. So by listening to other people's stories of the residential school, each and every one of them has a different experience, maybe a similar experience, but differently. That's what I understood from listening to Clara and some other people that I have heard from the previous years. And when I find out that I was going to a residential school, I left from here to Thunder Bay first of all to go back home to be with my parents. I was in Fort Hope, and I was there only for maybe a month or a little bit more than a month. Then I was off again to residential school. I was pretty happy leaving again because I knew that I would gain different experience to learn more how to read and write. But I was not aware of what was going on at the residential school at that time until I experienced it myself, seeing other kids being abused from the staff or from the student of the residential school itself. And when I got there, I didn't experience anything what Claire experienced. There were nuns and other staff that was there to greet us, and they separate us from the girls and from the boys. Like my sisters were there, three of my sisters were there, so they separated us. But what I experienced from my sisters, every time when they used to see me, they used to say hi to me, come closer to me and say hi and ask me how I'm doing. But I didn't really acknowledge them because I was familiar of being away from my family from the years that I was at the hospital. Anyway, back to residential school. I didn't experience like totally chaos at the residential school. I experienced abuse mainly from the students, but not from the staff. And when I used to get in trouble, like I still do something wrong today, even though I'm old. I still do something wrong today. And back then, I did something wrong too, and I got punished for that. And wandering back to the years of residential school, being punished, I must have did something wrong. The reason why I was standing in the corner or being sent to bed at an early time. And but when I experienced these kind of small punishments, they all there was always a nun that came to my rescue. When she knew that I was put in a corner, she would get me out of there. And when she knew that I was sent to bed early, she would come and get me. Anything like that, she was always to the rescue. I don't know how she knew, maybe in a mysterious way. I just don't know. And still today, uh, I, I still think about her. Maybe she passed on already. I don't know. So there must have been a reason why she was always there for me. And there was another two boys or three boys I used to know. She used to do the same thing with them. My first cousin and my nephew was the other two, and the other one was from Martin Falls. She used to be around us. She used to be around us quite a bit, but I didn't ever ask these other boys if she ever touched them or bothered them in a different way. I didn't ever ask them, but from my experience, she never did such thing to me like that. No sexual abuse or no other kind of abuse. But I experienced that the other kids were been abused. I experienced that. I see them with my own eyes. I used to cross my fingers not to be treated like that. And 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 I went through with that, not being abused and being at the residential school. I was there for 3 years. I was in McIntosh. That's what it was called. Somewhere in Dryden area, Vermilion Bay. It was the closest town I think it was. So I experienced differently than than other people, other kids, what they experienced. So I cannot really say residential schools were bad. or residential schools were good. But the good stuff that I experienced, I still have these experiences, like learning how to read and write, learning how to pray, and go to church. I still do that every once in a while. But that was a good thing. But my parents, I used to see my parents doing the same thing every time when a priest come. They used to go and pray. But I didn't ever really see my parents pray at the home in the front of us. And only very rarely I would see them, once in a while. Like my mother used to take out her beads, her rosaries. My dad, same thing, but not too often. Like, that was a totally different thing. Maybe they pray in their own traditional way. I don't know. They never mentioned that to me. But I've learned these kind of things from different people, different elders, to pray in my own traditional way. There was another thing that the nun had told me, and I kept it. She told me, when you're here at the school, you gotta do what you are told to do, and there'll be a time that you'll decide on your own what are you going to be doing. Like, you'll have your own choice later on in life, but not right now. That's how she explained it, and I experienced that. Even at home, I experienced that. I couldn't make my own decisions, but when I got older, that's when the time came to make my own decisions, and to do was what I wanted to do. So slowly, that's when I started praying in my own traditional way, the way other people used to express it to me. And slowly, these kind of things approach me. Even my way of living approached me: how to fish, how to trap, how to provide for my own family. These things slowly came to me by listening to the people that were expressing these kind of things. And another elder, which I still keep today, his expressions was, the foreigner's method of way of living is not that bad. And same thing with us, the way we live, it's not that bad. But the world is changing, he said, and you have to learn how to change with it. So when I got older, I experienced that living on the reserve. Like, I had to work in order to provide for myself. If I don't work, I don't get nothing on the table. No clothing or the things that I needed to provide for myself. Trapping was dying. Commercial fishing was dying, was slowly disappearing. And the only method that was going strong was white men's method of surviving, like getting a job. And getting a job, you got to have papers. You have to have a degree. You got to have education. So, reason why I express these things, the foreigner's way of living is not that bad if you understand how to handle it, how to go by it. Even the traditional way of living is not bad either. But the thing is, traditional way of living is slowly disappearing. And just like that elder that I mentioned, when he told me that the world was mentioned, the world was changing. And that's what's happening today. And traditional people or Aboriginal people, are having a hell one of a time to go back to their roots. That's what I've been experiencing from each time when I go back home. Because when I go back to my reserve, nobody talks in Ojibwe. I always talk in English. That's the thing. Maybe because the children went to residential school, and then they were forced to speak in English. And one person was telling me not too long ago. He tells me, he says, Wolford, do you experience residential school experience every once in a while? I told him, yeah. The good stuff I remember, I tell him, but the bad stuff I don't. He says, yeah, I'm always talking to you in English, he says. I told him, yeah. And he says, the reason why I'm always doing that is when I talk to you in Indian, you might hit me, he says. He says, every time when I was in residential school and when I speak my own language, I get hit. So that's why I'm always talking to you in English. And because I'm scared for you to hit me, he says. You know, that kind of experience that some people. And he was asking me if I felt that way each time when I talk to my own language in public here in San Bay. I told him no. I told him when I want to talk my own language, I talk wherever I want to talk in my own native tongue. I told him, I'm not scared. I told him, but him, he was. But I told him that you still got a long way how to deal with that. I told him. Even my kids, every once in a while, they talk in native tongue. I could see the results of the residential school, and I think in order to get back to our own culture is the people, the Aboriginal people. It's them that has to do it if they want to go back to their own traditional way of life. And for myself, I prefer to balance out the foreigner's way and the Aboriginal way. I would prefer to be right in the middle because I have to accept and respect both sides. I cannot only respect one side or when they want me to do something for them, but not like a social call to say hello and to say how you're doing. So that's why I mentioned earlier, like I would rather be right in the middle instead of taking a side. And I think when I look into residential school, people going to residential school, I think that like my parents didn't really have no choice except us to go. When I did a little research on that, the thing what I found out was like they were told to go on to live on a reserve, and later on their kids to go to residential school, and the government to back it up was they were told that you won't be getting any assistance from the government if you don't allow your children to go to residential school, or if you don't decide to go on live on a reserve. Like even though you're treaty, you won't still be get any assistance from the government. I think that's what they were told. So that's why they had decided for their children, for us to go to residential school. Maybe my life would have been different today. Maybe I would have be blind today. Or maybe I would have become an alcoholic. Maybe I would have went through the struggles that I experienced. And still today, I still experience these kind of struggles that I experienced when I was growing up. That's what I've been thinking about a lot lately. And and these kind of experience that I experienced when I was growing up, it's more likely they're reviewing themselves, the experience what I experienced when I was growing up, more likely reviewing to me every now and then. And the things I missed out on when I was growing up, because I experienced a lot of interference, and the things that I not supposed to do, I did, like being an alcoholic, addiction, being going to jail, doing sentence, things like that. And if I had maybe a good guide or a good teacher when I was growing up, maybe my life today would be different. But the things that I experienced when I was growing up, the things I did wrong, I slowly express these kind of things towards when a person comes and approach me for an advice, or if a person just want to talk about his or her personal issues. I use what I experienced. I turn around into teachings. One of my things that stay with me from childhood, like even when I was at a residential school or day school, one of my expectations was to be a resource person to any nationality, and part of that expectation was to be decorated with education. That was my childhood expectation, and it still is today. And I couldn't achieve that because of the difficulties that I put myself through. I cannot really blame anybody what I went through. And I was saying that to one person not too long ago, and I guess he thought about it, and he got back to me and he said, "Wolf, you cannot really totally blame yourself of what you went through." He says, part of the environment, he called it environment, I guess, like the people I associate with, like residential school, the reservation, and among these kind of things I experienced. He says, part of that environment is the cause of that. That's what he said. And I thought about that. And I said, yeah, that's right. And then I look into it. And, and that's what it is, you know. I cannot really blame myself for what I experienced. Not totally, anyway.
What I remember back then, when the kids were being taken away from the community and they were boarded on an airplane, a float plane. We didn't have no airport or airstrip. We just had landed on the water. And I remember how quiet it was that day, and I didn't understand why it was so quiet. It must have been anxiety or fear of knowing that your child is not going to be with you for the rest of the whole year, for 10 months. And then as soon as they see the plane coming, like people that could see far away, I hear them yelling in the language, "It's coming, the plane is coming, Ajay, be a good day, Miss Ewan," and then everybody scrambling around looking for their kid, and everybody went to the dock, and then I didn't know what that was all about. And the next thing I knew, I'm one of them that's getting on a plane with my sister. And then what I know is that the Indian Affairs, whoever was in charge, you can't fight for your child. You have to let them go. That's how they did that to our elders. I remember an elderly woman, when her kids were getting on a plane, she had tears in her eyes and she was like crying. And she said that she was still breastfed. When I remember that as an adult, it just made me really emotional, because that little girl was really crying a lot, and then and I don't know what happened. I don't remember what happened. Like, it must have been really horrible. You're attached to your mom and you're breastfed, and you have that relationship, that bond, and then it's like stripping the child away from the mom. It must have been like a deep scar, a deep wound, that bleeding. The mom must have been bleeding because he was still breastfeeding her. I myself, when I got on a plane, I have no idea what's going on. I'm just so confused, so like, I don't know. I don't know what's happening. I don't even know how to describe it. I'm just 6 years old and seen other kids on a plane. I play with them. And then we got to the Makina, and I got so scared that that was alien to me. Everything was different comparing to the bush life that I grew up with, that I was accustomed to. My language and closest to the land and the water, being with grandma all the time, and now I'm separated from my family. It was so scary that I felt all alone, even though I'm around with other children. Imagine how other kids must have felt leaving their community, your loved one that was close to you, your grandpa, your grandma, your parents, your siblings, uncles and aunties. You know how much I have held emotions, feeling lonely. And then when we got to the residential schools, we weren't even allowed to express ourselves. Everything was so cold, so different. The language horrible, awful. Look, to me, it was evil. As a kid, 6 years old, I must have sensed that evilness about them, what they're about to do to us. And I didn't know what was going to happen to me for those years that I attended, from 1964 to 1967 at St. Joe's boarding school here in Thunder Bay, formerly known as Fort William. The first year of my schooling in residential school, it was so horrible. It was a nightmare. It was hell, because I have to have to go into transition to learn everything different, to give up my language, not to cry. And if I didn't know how to speak English, and I'm trying really hard, and I'm scared at the same time, I felt so powerless over these big authoritarian figures that were forcing me to speak their language. I felt so small and so helpless. I wish I was had my grandma with me to protect me. Some of my grandmother. I don't like it here. I thought, I remember holding back my tears and holding back my feelings of hate and anger and fear and loneliness. And then what they did to me, because I said something in my language that I didn't understand. I tried to be nice to them and say, "Kawan nindisitos tanzin." That's what I said. I don't understand. And then just all of a sudden, I'm being grabbed and soap was shoved in my mouth, and I was standing in the corner. That's the first time I ever experienced standing in the corner. My family, our elders don't put kids in the corner if they're in trouble. Like, what mistake have I done? To deserve that? I didn't do nothing wrong. That's supposed to help me understand that I can't talk that language. That's supposed to help me, okay, Claire is going to learn how to speak English now, so she doesn't have to stand in the corner, so she didn't have to have soap in her mouth. That's not helping. Didn't help me at all. It just made me feel inhuman, that I'm not part of. Rather than saying in a loving, kind way, and rather than, if that was it was, if we were treated with more respect and more kindness, we wouldn't have the life that we had experienced with alcoholism, violence, and abandonment, and all that history of our lives, what we had to go through. No wonder why I didn't know how to be, how to be a good friend, how to be, a loving person. I just felt so isolated because I can't reach out to my sister she's there, and I'm not even allowed to be close there. You know how much I wanted to cry. I wanted her closeness because that's the only family member that I had. But I'm not allowed to be with her. Horrible. Horrible for a child to experience that, to separate them with your own sibling. I can't believe that. It's so unimaginable that, you know, a person with that kind of background who works with Christianity to treat an Indigenous child, what we had gone through. They pray, they go to church, they have good faith with the Christian world, like God and Jesus and things that we were taught. It's so unbelievable. Like, if it was my grandchild who is 5 years old, you know, I wouldn't want him to go to residential school. If there was still in my language, because I was shamed. My language was shameful. That's what I believed in. I was brainwashed from the Catholic mission that had tortured me for speaking in my language. Like, if I speak the language, I'm making a big mistake and I'm going to get in trouble. So I might as well withheld it. You know, I almost lost my language. I almost didn't know how to speak the language when I went back to my community. I didn't even know who my parents were. I didn't even know who my grandmother. When I went home for the first time after 10 months, other kids went home that live in Long Lac and Geraldton or Upsala. But if you're from Lansdowne, Fort Hope, in a remote community, they won't send you home. They would rather send you in the foster care somewhere, like, I don't know where I was. I don't know where my other sister was. They still put you in foster care rather than sending you to your family to see again. That's how what happened to me, and I'm sure that someone has similarities of my story and what had happened to them too. I have another story that I wanted to mention about the button incident. What happened in residential school that time was that because I was playing so roughly and I was getting all dirty and I was jumping into puddles and climbing trees, just like the things that I enjoyed when I was in the bush. That's the only way I know how to play. I didn't know how to play skipping rope and hopscotch and play with the monkey bars. And we had a wooden swing. I remember that one. So then I would always get scolded because I was playing too rough, that I don't play like a girl. And then that's what the supervisor would say. And then girls they don't want me near them because I splash. If I splash on them, you're going to get me all dirty, and then I'm going to get in trouble. So I didn't know what that meant, getting in trouble, because they're speaking English and I barely understand English. So I just kept on doing what I was doing, and then by the time we were called in to line up for lunch, my jumpsuit and I was wearing a red jumpsuit with white blouse and white stockings, and I was all dirty and scruffy to them in their eyes, but to me, I was having fun, and I didn't never look at myself that way. And then we had to line up. The supervisor, before we head upstairs, it's almost like we have to march to go to our lunchroom, and we have to line up in a straight line. So she checked all of us and make sure everybody's properly the way we have to. It was more like a command more than or order. You know how that's how it felt like. And she always had this stick ruler or a pointer, and she had this, when she's walking, everybody quiet, and you hear her I don't know, her shoes would just echo on the floor, and then like I said yesterday, she reminded me of that Hitler that's always being dictating lives in their country. That's who she reminded me of, the way she was treating us. So as soon as she came by, she passed by me, and then the button fell on the floor. I grabbed it at first, and then I put it on. I put it on the buttonhole, and then it fell off again. Then she turned around and came back to me and stood right in front of me. She told me to come forward to the front. So I went, and she told me to take your clothes off. And she started shaving my hair, and in front of all these other, from kindergarten to grade 8 students, and everybody's quiet, and I'm really scared and freaking out and not knowing what's happening, and I'm holding back my tears, and I'm very terrified. So, and she had these boys' clothes. She went to go get some boys' clothes. She had them with her, and then she told me to put these on, and I did, not knowing why she wanted me to wear these boys. Since you cannot act like a girl, you're now a boy, she said to me. And then we all went to the upstairs to go to the lunchroom, and me, I was escorted to go to the boys' lunchroom. And then she made an announcement and said, "Students, we have a new boy in school today." And when she said that, I just looked really down. I didn't want to open my eyes. I felt horrible. She said that I was a new boy, and then the kids that knew me, who I was in my classroom, they started laughing because they knew who I was. I felt so it was a very humiliating experience, and I felt ridiculed. She ruined my identity, who I was. Like when you're very young, you don't change anybody's identity. You are who you are. That's who I am. And no one can say you're a boy now. No one can say you're a girl now. Because I was already, designed what kind of human being I was going to be. Because I was so ashamed of who I was. Just like my language, I was shamed. And my identity, I was shamed. My community, I was shamed. That I'm no longer with them. I'm with the school system. And for me to understand these things, what took place and why did these things happen, I did listen to elders. I listened to research on. I went to gatherings, conventions, and I discovered that this happened many years before my time. That the Anishinaabe people were being assimilated to Christianity, the Western way of life. They want us to be like them. They're going to make us more like a civil person. And the way they saw us was probably like we're not human. They're going to civilize us. They're going to educate us, but that's more punishment to our people. And taking away their language and destroying all their items, their bundles, their community bundles. And when I think about what's happening in now, like what's happening now to our people, look at what's going on in today. There's a lot of drugs, lots of people are dying, our youth, suicide. That's because of the loss of their self. Like when we grew up as a young from residential school, you're no longer part of the community. You no longer know how to be a mother when you grow up. You no longer be a good friend. You don't know how to hug and kiss your children. You know how they, like, my grandmother used to hug and kiss me, and that has lost because of what happened to our people. When you stimulate love and loving the child, the baby, when they grow up, they feel loved. They'll be loving people. But if there's alcohol and drugs, a lot of children were abandoned, left alone because of what happened in their lives. Is the loss of like their children are gone. Some kids didn't go home. They never they don't know where their child when they died. Like I always think that the white people didn't even care. I remember my mom's story. I want to mention it, that she said, I remember she went to McIntosh. I remember this. There was a dormitory. I guess that's how the beds were. Same thing as the school that I went. There was always dorms. There was this girl who she was sick, and then she was in bed for a while, and then one day in the middle of the night, I guess my mom said, I saw a nun coming to her, and then she went back, and then she came back again. I didn't want her to move. It's almost like she probably just stopped breathing. That's how it is in residential school. You stop breathing when you don't want to get caught. Keep still. You don't want to get caught when you see something. They roll up this girl in a blanket. She rolled up this girl in a blanket and took her away, and nothing was said after that. No. So where did she go? Or was kept quiet. That's what I always think like that when they say unmarked graves, like as if whoever buried them don't even care about the moms and the family and the community. I wanted to mention about I was used to being called in my nickname in the language until I went to school. That I was Clara, and I didn't know that. And then when we arrived at the school, after all the kids were picked up along the way from the Keena, Geraldton, Longlac, and the Armstrong children came later. They were on a different train, I guess. So they all gave us numbers, and that's how they identify you as a number. You're not your Anishinaabe name anymore, how they named you. And then even the senior girl told me that you're now Clara. So make sure you listen when they call your name Clara. That's what she was trying to help me, but I didn't understand. I know also that there was a lot of bullying, and there was no monitoring. Like whoever gets hurt by being bullied, you have to be quiet about it. You can't say anything. It's horrible. You know, those schools are meant for disaster. It was nothing that, you know, you could say I learned a lot from going there. I did learn English, but the way you were treated was horrible. I could live with learning English, but the way you were tortured, that will be with me for the rest of my life. I inherited that. It's in my system, and it comes in a story to share that this really happened. But my stories are true.
Thank you, Clara.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I just want to thank Clara and Wilf again for their heartfelt stories and sharing them with so much honesty and frankness. We really appreciate you doing this. And last, we are going to have Kathy read a poem she wrote about residential schools. Kathy's powerful poem was a foreseen adventure she knew she had to act upon. It was something she couldn't put to rest until the poem was completed. During a sacred sweat large experience in which a spirit comes in and guides you in the direction, and you do as the spirit guides you, she left herself open to the guidance of the spirit, with the end result of hundreds of children coming forth from the fire, giving strength to her poem. Kathy is compelled and determined not to falter on this spiritual and emotional journey of giving a voice to those who have none.
Desecration. You keep thinking the cycle is going to carry on and that we'll keep drinking and singing the same sad song, but I'm here to tell you that you're very wrong. We are singing and dancing to a different song. The heartbeat drum is what keeps us strong. But you keep hiding behind your glory and fame. We all know it's nothing but shame. You can run and hide and wear a disguise, but the whole world knows about your lies. Assimilation, that's your game. Let's make them all be the same. And if you don't listen, some of yous may go missing. No one will ever tell because this kind of religion is straight from hell. Let's cut your hair to be one of us. Smack, smack. Don't fidget or make a fuss. Oh, going home, that's your plan? Well, let me introduce you to this religious man. Come sit with me on bended knee. Pardon me if things get nasty. Now put your feelings upon this shelf. Bend over, my dear, while I help myself. The pain is insane. There's nothing to gain. These tears fall harder than the heaviest of rains. There's no escape from this thing called rape. You've taken me to a room filled with silence and doom. Off come my clothes. Now my body is exposed. This is where you help yourself while my feelings are being put on the shelf. There will be no running or no hiding while you are all siding with a belligerent religion that's all trying to make us fit into a doctrine that's filled with nothing but sin. I can't tell you about these feelings inside because they've all curled up and died with every little tear that I've cried. It's a rage in humanity. It's locked in a cage of insanity. This life is a calamity as the holy book is slammed at me. You say this is a great lesson to learn as I lay there waiting for you to finish your turn. You tried, I cried, and then you lied, while deep down inside, I slowly died. Now you're going to bury me into the ground to silence the violence till there is no sound.
it's Danica. I would like to thank Wilf, Clara, and Kathy for sharing their personal trauma and experiences with us. To those of us who are allies, it is now our job to reflect on what we have learned today. On September 30th and beyond, we must focus on our individual paths to reconciliation with the Indigenous communities across Turtle Island. You will find resources on Employee Central under the IDEA team resources to assist in your learning journey. There are also many mental health supports if you require them. Please refer to the email that went out from Mahadeo on September 27th for direct links.